Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell. And this week, we're going to tackle topics like when the gossip is too hot, porn shame, and carrying our heavy truths. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that we are not licensed mental health practitioners of any kind. We're not accredited, trained. Nobody gave us a stamp of approval.
Experienced. Yeah.
We just bought ourselves some microphones and we're like, let's do this thing.
Yes. Yeah. Sam and I are not professionals. We are not trained in this. So please take our advice as you see fit. We are only here to offer our humble musings to hopefully shed some understanding and maybe some laughs on the incredibly rewarding, but mostly confusing experience that is love and life. We really talk a lot about life now, too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I love that.
Just changing up the script 4 years in.
Listen, we get to do what we want. That's what that whole Surgeon General's warning is about.
Is that we're chaotic.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So for this week's check-in topic, we are panning into the life portion of our advice. This is actually inspired by a piece of advice I found online, but I wanted to check in about feeling overwhelmed and how to move through feelings of anxiety and shame when we feel like we have like so much to do that we can't get to, or because we're so overwhelmed with other things that we can't focus on the things we want. I'm thinking specifically in my life about like having a bunch of chores to do, like having a messy house and laundry to put away and dishes to be done. And I'm also supposed to meal plan, go for a walk, and like meditate and like deal with my childhood trauma. It can feel like impossible to do head and heart work sometimes, or to prioritize the type of positive thinking that I want to do when I feel like I'm also drowning in menial everyday tasks or whatnot. Is that something that you relate to?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Deeply relate.
How does that manifest in your life?
It manifests for me in a lot of, I sort of think of it as like fracturing, where I'm like doing 7 things at the same time and I'm doing none of them to completion
or effectively.
Yeah. So it's
relatable.
like I'm like, okay, I've got my to-do list and it's like I need to fold the laundry and I need to like dust everything and I need to clean the bathroom and I need to figure out the travel for the wedding that we have to go to and like all of these things. And so what'll happen is that I'll do each of them at the same time. And so like I will like fold half the laundry and then like get really distracted because I went to the bathroom and the bathroom was dirty, and then I'll start cleaning the bathroom and then I'll be like, I don't know what to do next. And then I'll like start dusting. And then suddenly I'm staring at my phone looking at like prices on Kayak or whatever. And It's just like, and then none of it gets done. And then it's all just messier because it's just like my house is now full of like half-done projects. So the laundry's
like that's
out.
a metaphor for like our emotional issues too.
Absolutely. I mean? Yeah. I think that they manifest themselves in similar ways.
Yeah, totally. I agree. And I think I also want to bring into the equation like folks who have the inclination to feel shame about those things, because it's not just like the added anxiety of like, oh, I got this huge to-do list. It's what does this unfinished to-do list say about me as a person? And
also
that almost makes it even harder. It makes these tasks bigger and weightier and gives them a place in your heart and your head that's much more domineering and defining than it is in reality. Like if you have dirty dishes in your sink, which is like my go-to image, that doesn't mean you're like a bad person or a failing person or an undeserving person. And I think so often we conflate our to-do list or our feelings of being overwhelmed with our sense of our capabilities. Like, because I am overwhelmed and I have a big to-do list, and they're all stupid little tasks that I've been procrastinating. I therefore am incapable, and this is an equation of my abilities. Or excuse me, this is the product of my abilities. I can't do anything. It's so much. It contributes so much to our narrative about ourselves. So what really prompted me to bring this to the podcast is a tip that I found online that I've been applying in my own life. It was by like a online creator, Instagram folk person called Sarah Nicole Landry. Her handle is at the Birds Papaya. She writes a lot about I found her because she writes and posts a lot about postpartum bodies and changing and parenthood and also being a digital creator. And recently she posted a reel about when you feel overwhelmed by a bunch of small tasks. Her tip is to time yourself doing one of the tasks. And the example she gave was emptying the dishwasher. When we feel like we have a million tasks that are bogging us down, that are keeping us from not just doing what we want to do or relaxing, but are keeping us from feeling capable and feeling good about ourselves, it's empowering to actually use a timer, set a timer and see how long things take and set a designated time to do them. Because if you realize that emptying the dishwasher actually takes 2.5 minutes, barely, then all of a sudden it's brought into reality, and outside of the big anxiety that makes it feel so controlling and imposing on your life. I have laundry upstairs that I haven't put away in weeks. I want to say multiple weeks, and I keep looking at it and thinking oh God, I just got to put that away, but it'll take so long, or and that it just adds to my stress. And we know that those little tasks that have nothing to do with our mental health are directly connected to our mental health often, and the stories and the lies that we tell about ourselves. So, I was talking to somebody earlier today, and they were expressing that they felt like they had lots to do in their house and they couldn't keep up. And I said, you know what? First of all, a clean space doesn't mean that you're a good person, but set an hour timer, clean your house for an hour, and then take the rest of the day off if you can, it doesn't have to be an all day thing. And you'll be amazed at what you can get done in an hour and how good you feel. And then give yourself permission to rest. Give yourself permission to play, to be engaged in something else other than feeling bad about how little you do, Yeah. This has just been take this or leave this. This has just been something that's been helpful for me in especially with a newborn, but also everyday fucking life, like laundry. And it's helped me reposition it in my mind as something that I can fit into my day in a way that doesn't feel so exhausting and harmful to my sense of self.
Sure. No, I love that. I think the ways that I handle those instances where I'm feeling super overwhelmed is that I always tell myself, do one thing at a time. I actually have that written on a Post-it note on my computer as a reminder to say just do one thing, right? That's actually going to be more helpful to you than trying to do 7 things at the same time. And the other thing that I say to myself often is move with intention, which is about if I do the thing with intention, it's going to go much faster. And then I'm going to be able to relax more.
Wow, I love that.
More intentionally afterwards, as opposed to doing what I often do, which is I'm cleaning the bathroom and then I'm staring at my phone for
naked
10 minutes. And then I'm wow, cleaning the bathroom takes 45 minutes. And it doesn't if I would just move with more intention.
Yes.
So when I catch myself doing stuff like that, I'm okay, remember, do one thing and move with intention. And then after that, then you can devote actual time to rest as opposed to trying to find rest in places where it's not actually restful because I'm still stressed about the job that I haven't done yet.
Yes,
that I'm like
totally.
in literally the middle of.
Yes. And I appreciate this conversation and want to just add to it too. Like, I don't think that these are things that we have to do or conquer in order to feel good about ourselves. Like, no. I think that we can feel good about ourselves and change the narrative about ourselves when our house is filthy, when our bed isn't made, and when the bathroom isn't cleaned, or when it does take us all day to accomplish that one little task because of whatever is holding us back. But I know that for me, those narratives that I keep referencing can really strip me of my sense of self and strip me of my sense of my, I don't know, like that, my confidence, and they can really bog me down when I want to be focusing on feeling good about myself or focusing on my newborn daughter or whatever. So these are just a couple tips for y'all if you relate to any of this, because we all get overwhelmed. We all get stuck by things that shouldn't stick us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important to remember that all of this stuff has nothing to do with who you are as a person, and that there are multiple reasons why we might struggle to do the things that we want to do in our homes that have nothing to do with our personal self-worth, right?
Right, exactly.
And that have everything to do with a lot of other stuff that may be impacting us or preventing us from doing those things that we want to be doing. So, if you are feeling overwhelmed, just know that, like, first of all, you're not alone.
No kidding.
Right? Like, I think a lot of us are feeling overwhelmed. And secondly, that, like, doesn't mean anything about you. And all you can do is just, like, something, Yeah. Like, that's all you can do.
Literally time it. Say, I'm going to set a timer and I'm going to fold my laundry for 3 minutes. 3 minutes. That's how long a slam poem is from my... from my old days in the spoken word world.
Go on YouTube, Google or search for Sierra DeMulder, put on paper dolls or something like that, and fold laundry until it's done.
You're so cute. Oh my God, it's so nice to have a fan. Sam Blackwell. Okay, anyway, y'all, hope that means anything to you at all. And if not, cool. All right, let's get into our letters.
We're not always for everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, our first letter comes from Secret Keeper, whose pronouns are she, her, and who's writing from in between a rock and a hard place. Dear Sierra and Sam, it's never in that order. Very true. I've been binging and listening to your podcast for about a year, and it's helped so much with me evolving as a person, and I appreciate both of you and Spencer for all that you do. Thank you all so much. On to the issue. I, 29 she, her, have been seeing a guy, Daniel, 29 he, him, for a couple of months, and we're both non-monogamous. I've recently gotten to know his other partner, Mallory, 21 she, her, who he's been with for about 9 months, and we are becoming fast friends. I genuinely enjoy her company, and we hang out just us now and have a great time. However, she has maybe gotten a little too comfortable revealing her issues with her and Daniel's relationship to me. I realize I should have established boundaries on this right off the bat, but the things Mallory is saying Daniel has said to her are disturbing me. He's been short-tempered, rude, and downright mean at times to her. I even told Mallory that as her friend, not as Daniel's other partner, if I was her, I would have just broken up. She said she considered it after their most recent fight, which was apparently about me, but ultimately decided against it. This is genuinely bothering me that he's treating my new friend this way, and also that he has this side to him. I'm surprised about who I'm getting involved with. He has never been like that to me at all. He's been nothing but caring, sweet, and communicative thus far. To be honest, even in this short time, he's been a better partner to me than almost everyone else I've ever dated in this time frame. We see each other about twice a week and talk every day, and this just sounds nothing like the person I've been getting to know. I want to talk to him about it, but I can't because I promised Mallory I wouldn't say anything to him about what she's told me. I don't know how to reconcile these discrepancies or even just get his side of the situation without betraying her trust. I'm wondering what I should do. Talk to Daniel anyway? Just tell Mallory to stop filling me in on their problems and leave it at that? Wait around for him to start treating me this way before addressing it? Or is this a red flag that I should just break up now? I guess my ultimate question is my partner's problems with his other partner my problem or not at all? Thank you so much for listening. I love you guys so much. Thanks for throwing that tongue twister in there. That was a challenge to read. It's like you were trying to trick me into messing up.
Yeah, that's what she was trying to do.
Absolutely. That's the story I'm telling myself.
Okay. Hi, my darling. Thank you so much for writing. Oh my God. Time out for a second. Somebody DM'd us a meme that was like, it was a tweet that was like, if you ever have said my love or my darling, please know that I've heard you say that in a Dracula voice or something like that. And she said, at Sierra, or was it like, I hear this in Sierra's voice.
It's true. So you do say my
darling. Love. Oh no, that's not really what is a Dracula voice? Nope.
My love. Nope. I don't know. I want to suck your blood, my darling.
My darling. There we go. It's like, sort of Italian.
It's like so like Borat adjacent that it's like not cute.
I just want to apologize to all Italians and all vampires for that terrible impersonation of you.
I want to offer my deep regrets to the vampire community for the thing that I just did.
Okay, back to you, my darling secret keeper. Thanks so much for writing and for listening and for trusting us with this letter. Yeah, you are in a hard place. You're in between a hard place and a rock, so to say. Mm-hmm. And this is a tricky question. I don't think we've ever gotten a question like this particular situation. And I just want to start by saying you're doing the best that you can, and you're in a tricky position. I have to admit, even in a monogamous relationship, if somebody came to me and said, "Oh God, your partner said this to me, please don't say anything to them," I would be like, excuse me, Willow? Why were you such a dick to this person? Or I would that would be something that would confront the reality of my relationship with new information. And I would want to respond. This is your desire to be like, Daniel, what's up? Or what is this is totally reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is something that you can talk to Mallory about and see if explain how you're feeling and what's going on with you, and be like, this is something that I want to talk with him about because I want to understand him and why he's doing these things to you, because I am also his partner.
Right.
And this is impacting me and my relationship with him as well. I do think it's a little it is a little unreasonable for Mallory to say, don't tell him anything about this, because you are all in a relationship together, right? So it's it's really difficult to be in a position where you can't talk to the other person that you're in a relationship with about shit that got said about him or about what he does and how he behaves, right? And it wouldn't be surprising to me if he treats you differently than he treats Mallory for multiple different reasons, because of the fact that they've been in a relationship longer, because of the fact that she's significantly younger than both of you. It makes sense to me that he could be really one way with you and really a different way with her. And it does seem a little bit unfair to me that you can't investigate with him this discrepancy in behavior. And I think it's reasonable for you to go to Mallory and explain this and ask for her permission to be able to at least talk to him about your experience with him.
I totally agree. And just pulling out a word you said, that it's unreasonable of Mallory to expect you to not talk to him about this. It might not be, I agree, number one, but we're not saying that she isn't allowed to talk to people or confide in people. But it's, if I was in your position, letter writer, this is a perfect example about how we can do our best to respect people's boundaries and to meet their needs and to, I don't know, be a neutral party or whatever. But at a certain threshold, it becomes no longer sustainable for you to abide by their wishes. Like, that's just a fact of life sometimes. Sometimes we disappoint people, or sometimes circumstances change and dynamics change and or are challenged and need to be readdressed. So like, I think you could, just like Sam said, it's what is required now is for you to go to Mallory and say, listen, I'm sorry I didn't set up a firmer boundary in the past. I've really enjoyed our friendship. I really love being close with you. But because of some of the things you've said to me, it is now like permanently affected the way I am looking at my relationship. And I'm no longer able to keep this between us. Honestly, that's difficult because it's like she asked you not to talk to him, but this is real life. This is now affecting your life. You're not a neutral party, right? This is your partner, Yep. And I honestly, forgive me because I am historically monogamous and I'm not practiced in polyamorous relationships. So I don't know if there is a protocol to this, like if a polyamorous member of the community would say that there's a different way to go about this. So just forgive me in advance. And I hope that some of our listeners are able to provide more support for you, perhaps on the Just Break Up Facebook private page or whatnot.
Right.
But yeah, this is now when we try to be good listeners and good support systems, it is from a different advantage point than this. This is half your life, half a friendship. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that big question of like, are my partner's problems my problems too? Like, I think to a certain extent, yes, especially the way that it's playing out, right? If they were having their own issues over here, and you were sort of separate from them and he was the only sort of go-between, like then it would be different in a way because like you wouldn't know about what was happening in that relationship. But like the fact that and the fact that you're all connected makes it your problem. And I do think that you have the right to say like, yeah, this is my problem now too. So like we need to figure out a way that I can have a conversation with him or we can sort of address some of this, right? Like I don't want you interfering in their relationship because like obviously it's clear to me and to you and apparently to Mallory that they should probably just break up. But I do think
Trademark.
that like, right. I do think that your concerns about how he is treating her are real because they deeply affect your understanding of how he's going to treat you, right? Like what if you get to the 9-month mark and now he's no longer sort of this kind, supporting person, but is saying really mean things to you or being rude with you or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And recognizing the fact that like people's experiences of other people are really informed by their own experiences too, right? So that it's like, difficult for you to even have a sort of deeper understanding of the ways in which this relationship is playing out between them because you're not in it either, right? Like,
right.
You're not experiencing it. You're experiencing it through Mallory's lens of her own experience of it, which may be very similar to or very different from Daniel's.
Yes.
So it's just like a really shitty place to be in. And I think Sierra is right that like establishing some boundaries around like what's appropriate and not appropriate for you all to be talking about is incredibly reasonable and I think needed in this situation so that you're not being given this information about this person from somebody who is also in your life.
Yeah. And also just like remember everybody's humanity because like like particularly yours, mm-hmm. we might set up like social guidelines, social rules to follow, like, oh, that's their relationship, it can't impact mine, or how he treats her is a reflection of of our relationship, so I have to leave him. Like we want these hard and fast rules to like make sense of things, but you're also a human. And, the example I'm thinking of is that like, I could have the best relationship with someone and then have somebody tell me this terrible thing that they did. And the human part of me would look at that person differently, would have to now take that new information and catalog it in somewhere, in some place, and in some way that made me feel okay or not okay. It's unreasonable to ask a human to not be affected by this, you know? Mm-hmm. And also, it is your relationship. It is your lived experience that you can bank on, I think, of this person. You're not obligated to, I don't know, lecture him or punish him for his shitty behavior to Mallory, but you can be curious about it, and you can hold him accountable to it in your interpersonal conversations, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think that this is like a really great opportunity too for you to have a conversation with Daniel about like how you two manage conflict with each other as well, right? So like I'm trying to think about like, I don't want you to go into this conversation being like, tell me what happened with Mallory and like why it happened, because like, I don't think that that's a constructive and helpful place for your relationship with Daniel. But I do wonder if you can or you can have a conversation with each other and say like, okay, so like we're in relationship with each other. Like we know that like conflict is going to be inevitable in that. So like, what are some of the ways that you handle conflict when it comes up? Like, what are some things that I should know about like what your preferences are? Because I'm thinking about the situation and being like, if he's being rude or being short, he may just have like a short fuse, and so that's something that you may need to know. Or he may be super direct in how he communicates, and that's something that you can know so that you can figure out how you want to navigate that space with him. But I want this conversation between you two to be proactive about your relationship and how you're going to sort of move forward, rather than trying to hash out this other relationship that you are not actually involved in and that you don't know anything about, right? Because it's not your relationship.
Right. That's perfect. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, this is just like a hard position to be in. So like, I understand your confusion, your hesitation, but I'm confident that you can, I guess like that confusion and the discomfort of it isn't reason enough not to address this to both parties.
For sure.
All parties involved. Yeah. So we hope that this helps. We love you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for writing.
All right. The next letter comes to us from Jake Fake Name, whose pronouns are he, him, who is writing to us from Pee Pee Poo Poo City, Butt District. You just wrote that to like make me say it. I get it. Okay. Hi, Sierra and Sam. I am a new listener. I can tell because you wrote Sierra and Sam and not Sam and Sierra. Just kidding. And have been binging episodes. I'm in love with the way you approach each of your letters with humor, compassion, and wisdom, and knew that I wanted to write something to you on the off chance you'd answer. Even if not, your answers to other people are plenty for me to chew on, and I thank you for that. That's very kind. Y'all are so very kind and generous.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I am a cishet 27-year-old, he, him pronouns, married to a 26-year-old she, they pronouns. We were both raised in Mormonism, which is, if you're not aware, a high-demand fundamentalist Christian religion. Think on the level of like Jehovah's Witnesses or other similarly culty Christian sects. There we go. Yeah. Sorry.
Culty Christian sex is my favorite kind of sex.
Sam and I are 14 today, so enjoy that one. And boobies. Okay, we grew up with a lot of misogyny, homophobia, and racism, and we're unlearning all of this since denouncing and leaving Mormonism around 2 years ago. My problem is that we got married very young, and while we were still Mormon, in that religion, you are encouraged to get married basically as soon as humanly possible and then pump out babies. So we knew each other for maybe a year and a half when we got married, and since then have both completely changed almost every aspect of ourselves. Religion and lack thereof, political beliefs, expectations about kids, family dynamics, literally everything. It's safe to say that while I love her, the marriage itself was a product of wanting to fulfill religious obligation. Something that has been a wedge between us since the beginning of since the beginning has been the use of porn. In Mormonism, porn is super taboo, and I have a lot of shame surrounding the use of it because I had to constantly, quote, confess using it to crusty old religious leader guys as a teenager, or else feel extremely depressed and ashamed. It's caused me anguish and exacerbated mental health issues throughout. This continued into our marriage, and when we were still in this religion, it was all of that shame, in addition to my wife thinking it was cheating, and the shame that came from that. I began a habit of lying about it because every time I confessed to her, it became an end of the world meltdown situation, which I understand because it was how she was taught to react. Fast forward to now. We are now out of the religion, and I no longer view porn use as wrong. However, there's still a lot of real harm in that the porn industry itself causes, which I acknowledge and try to be more mindful about what I actually consume. She's been working on being okay with my porn use because she's had a lot of feelings of betrayal and other stuff about it from the religion to unpack. She several times has expressed that she wants me to tell her when I use it, and I have lied to her anyway on several occasions. This has led to feelings of distrust on her part, of course, and feelings of shame and withdrawal further on my part. The reason I write this is because the issue intersects with the other huge issue I'm having. As I said, we got married really young, relative to most people, and she's the only person I've ever had sex with or has ever been in a relationship with that has lasted more than 3 months. I'm grieving the loss of any chance for me to experiment sexually and grow into myself before committing to one person for the rest of my life. I've learned about non-monogamy, and I'm not even sure if I'm a monogamous person at this point, but I'm married in a strictly monogamous relationship and will never get to explore any of that without losing my wife. This leads me to sometimes use porn as a way to fantasize about what ifs or whatever, ways to experiment sexually without me actually doing anything. But she wants me to not look at porn, or if she is okay with it, to always tell her about it. And this is leading me to feel lots of resentment because I'm like, quote, I have never got to experience any sexual variety or adventure in my life, and you're not even letting me pretend to do it and have this one thing to myself without controlling it. This brings a lot of conflict in our relationship, and I feel like it's my fault because I should just suck it up and be happy with the hand that was dealt with me rather than be sad that I never got to experiment or find myself or whatever. I don't know if I can continue this forever because these feelings of regret and resentment are eating at me, and I feel like my marriage and my life are all decided for me by other people, and I'm just stuck with it. Do you have any advice for someone who married way too quickly in their first relationship, who still loves their partner but regrets not doing more beforehand and resents not feeling free to explore what I actually want? I feel like an asshole typing this, but part of that might be leftover religious shame. So please help me understand if I'm just an ungrateful prick. I really don't know where to go from here. Oh, my darling Jake, fake name. I forgive you for making me say pee pee poo poo. I love you. And you're not an asshole. You were dealt a hand, to use your phrase, that is very challenging and very controlling and very tangled. It's going to take you a long time to untangle this. That's what indoctrinated ideals do to us, especially harmful ones, right? And, it's not enough that people not raised in cult-like religions, as you described it, are given their own indoctrination about ways to think about themselves, way to talk to themselves, ways that they should show up in relationships or not show up, ways that they should receive love. And that's hard as a base level. It's hard to be a human in relationships at a base level. And you have this added experience of trying to unpack all of these lies that you were told about yourself and your body and your love and your sexuality. And so I just want to say I love you. And I so deeply appreciate your vulnerability showing up in this letter, and your thoughtfulness in trying to unpack this before it explodes or erodes or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And I want to also create space for your wife in this too.
Yeah.
And just a gentle reminder to you and also to me and Sierra as we are sort of talking about this letter too, that she has also experienced the same or similar indoctrination that you have, right?
Yes.
And sort of this feeling that you're having of this resentment towards her to say like, wow, you're not even letting me do this thing. You're not letting me experiment. And I just want to remind you in the same, while seeing your experience of that she also didn't have the opportunity to experiment, right? That she also is grappling with what does it mean to be in a sexual relationship that isn't confined by the realities of the indoctrination or the realities of the religion that we're part of. And so she's struggling too with how to find the edges and boundaries of that, given the fact that leaving this church sort of took all those edges and boundaries and was like, loop, like just like sucked them all up. Because if that's the way that you all were sort of defining the parameters around which you operated, and now that's gone, you have to find different parameters. And the fact that you all entered into this marriage with an agreement around those religious restrictions, and now they're gone, means that it's really incredibly possible that the boundaries that you are going to find in your own experience of the world and through your own sort of morality and understanding of what you want and how you want to move through the love that you're offering each other might look really, really different, right?
Wow.
And that's painful to say out loud, but I think it's important to recognize, one, so that you can sort of see that this isn't necessarily your wife being an asshole to you, but this is sort of you all processing through this huge fundamental change to you as people,
yes,
and to you as a partnership. And that it's okay if it's not working because everything has changed about how this relationship is functioning, right?
Yes.
Like everything about it. Like we talk about learning and growing with each other in relationship a lot. And I love Spencer, you and Spencer talked about this on a Patreon episode once where you talked about like he also found his wife young. They like married at a relatively young age, and they were both lucky that they sort of grew together maybe at different paces and like maybe in different directions, but in ways that like
that was a read, Spencer.
But like they were able to support each other in that, and that they were lucky to find that. But it is a different thing to say, like, not only do you have to grow together, but also we're going to wipe out your whole understanding of like how the world operates.
Yeah.
And now that that's gone, which was sort of the defining feature of your relationship, now you got to figure out how to be together again.
And
that's
add
so
sexuality.
Hard.
Are you fucking kidding me?
For sure.
Sexuality is so complicated and is a lifelong journey. Right? We assume that it's just like so cemented, like once you come out as whatever you are, that is your journey for life, instead of like this nebulous ongoing discovery and exploration, add sexuality to this. And that feels like an impossible equation for the both of you. And I say that not because this is an unsolvable problem, but just to give you both, you and your wife, some grace, and to say neither of you are failing right now. You're being asked to do a lot. Really young, like you said, really young.
I think the issue here is that like I said, those sort of boundaries have been erased. They've been taken away because they were defined and understood through your religious process or through your religious understanding of the world. And what's really tricky here is that it's like, I don't think it's unreasonable for you to ask for privacy and how you like understand your sexuality and how you take care of your needs and how, right? Like thinking about masturbation as being like sex with yourself. Like, I don't think it's unreasonable for you to like want to keep that private and say like,
right.
This is what I do, or not to have to tell people like, this is what I do and how I do it. And I don't think it's unreasonable for her to say like, I'm deeply uncomfortable with porn and I don't want it in the house, right? Like there are different relationships where those things could be established.
Right.
And the issue here is that like you need to figure out how that's going to work between you two. And it sounds like those understandings of the world in this moment are just not in alignment, and they are not working out for either of you. And that's neither of your faults, right? Like, again, like, I know that this resentment is really challenging because it feels like your wife is like trying to take something away from you.
Yes.
But the issue here is that like the relationship itself has changed fundamentally, and the resentment towards your wife, I would say, is like a little unfair because she is also just trying to figure out what these new boundaries and edges are. And that can be really complicated, and that can be really emotionally fraught and triggering. And so it's just a pickle, as Sierra would say.
And I actually think the resentment, it's not that it's like unfair. I think that it's reasonable because that's what our hurt selves do. You know, like we have those feelings of like, I don't know, those feelings that are trying to like stand up for us or protect us, or I don't know what the fuck they're trying to do. But most importantly, I want you to take away that the resentment is actually could be very harmful to both you and your spouse in this relationship in the long term. The resentment might be trying to make you stand up for yourself or hold your wife accountable or even express your need. It might be helping you express your needs. Mm-hmm. But in the long term, resentment is like a pressure cooker, right? And even if you want to exit this relationship, you know, even if you're like, I'm done, then resentment can make you do that in ways that are more painful and scarring than not. So I don't want you to feel bad about feeling resentful, but I want you to address it as much, put as much energy towards that resentment as you can to be like, well, what am I feeling this way? How am I taking my feelings out on my wife instead of being direct and honest with myself about my needs? Are you resenting her for not letting you look at porn? Or do you not want to be in this relationship anymore? Are you resenting her for changing, but not changing into the person you are? Or I don't know. I lost my trail of thought, but yeah.
No, I think that's great. And I think that it really is about like.
Did I say trail of thought? Isn't it
you
train
did say
of
trail
thought?
of thought. Yeah, you said it, and it works. It works.
Yeah.
No, I think that the resentment that you're feeling towards your wife is, like Sierra said, understandable, and I think that a lot of the stuff that you're dealing with is beyond just your wife, right? Like you keep talking about how like you've been dealt this hand and that I have to deal with it, or like, you know, I feel like I should figure out how to be in this relationship, or like I am in this marriage that everyone else chose for me. And I also want to sort of recognize in the fact that like your wife is also in a relationship that people chose for her based on the way that Mormonism can function, right? And so how do you channel some of that frustration instead of at your wife into the situation itself, right? Like,
and compassion for yourself and for your wife.
And for your wife.
How can
Absolutely.
You be compassionate to both of you? Maybe the compassionate choice is breaking up. Maybe the compassionate choice is working really hard to reframe those boundaries from scratch, like Sam said, because they were evaporated, right? And maybe those new boundaries compassionately allow for privacy, or compassionately allow for experimentation, or compassionately allow for therapy. You know, like this is a lot of stuff that you're unpacking. And I think it's, like Sam said, it's really easy to project that frustration or all those really hard emotions onto your wife, who's also going through this at the same time.
Absolutely. And these questions that you can ask yourself around, like some of the things that you say in here of like, I feel like I should be doing this.
Yeah.
Cool. Where is that coming from? Like, who's telling you that? Is it you? Because guess what? You get to decide, you know, like who's asking you for that? Because I'm saying to you, like, I don't expect you to just sit there and deal with the hand you've been dealt, right?
Totally.
Like, your relationship has fundamentally changed. And so if you decide and you look at that and say, like, this isn't working for me anymore, I can totally understand that. I can also totally understand if your wife is feeling the same way, because again, your whole relationship has changed. And I think recognizing that and looking at that is going to be more helpful for you to figure out whether or not this relationship is something worth keeping than feeling resentful that you didn't get to experiment, right? Because like, let me tell you, you can get out of this relationship and experimentation may still not be available to you, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's wild out there. Like,
it's wild out there. But or let me jump on that. Like, yeah. I pulled out the word experiment too, because I want to reframe this all as like, we are all experimenting. And part of what you did is an experiment too. Like getting married really young and only having one sexual sexual apartment.
I've got multiple sexual apartments. Got one in every area code.
Sexual partner. That's an experiment too. And what we do when in relationship with one another is we try to see what we like. We experiment, as you say. I think that there's such a connotation with like experimenting because you're like, there's a temporariness to it and you're going to like get it all together and be less experimenty later in life. I don't think that's true whatsoever. And it like sort of devalues, I don't know, good relationships that don't last. And I also want to reframe finding yourself. You were dealt a really hard hand, but like Sam said, you're not cemented in this hand. This finding of yourself is going to go on for a long time, right? I cannot tell you how surprised I am by how much self-discovery I've done in the first 30 days of being 36. You know, like it just doesn't change. It doesn't stop. It's endless. And you were dealt a really hard hand. It's true. You were given these cemented beliefs. And now we have to figure out who you are without them. I try not to do this all the time, even though we always talk about therapy and we always suggest it, but I try not to lean on that. But I would just heavily, heavily, heavily suggest in this circumstance, especially to maybe seek out a professional counselor, therapist, relationship therapist, sex therapist, somebody that will help you unpack all of this and maybe give you some extra language or tips about how to talk about what happened to you, because it's traumatic, right? It's unpacking of these ideologies, like Sam said, that defined you for so long. And maybe your wife and you could do this together and sort of figure out what is the kindest, most compassionate way that you can sort of rebuild this relationship. That rebuilding might not be together, but you can still do it compassionately.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Jake. Want to say thank you for writing to us, for trusting us with this this pickle that you are currently in. I hope that what you hear from us is compassion for the situation that you're in, compassion for your wife in the situation that you're both in, and to recognize that you have a lot of options available to you in this moment. And it might feel like you're sort of backed into a corner. But Sierra and I want to invite you to come out and see what are some of the possibilities that are available to you in this moment.
That's right. And Jake, this shame, it's not serving you anymore. It's not going to protect you anymore. I want to give you permission to set it down if you can and see who you are without it. Who you are without that shame is a beautiful, loving person who deserves to have great sex, a great life, and who also deserves to be gentle with themselves and their loved ones. We believe in you. Thanks for writing.
We love you. All right. Our third letter comes from Nessie, whose pronouns are she, her, and who's writing from Sad City. I just want to give a content warning that there is talk of overdosing and the death of a spouse in this letter. Sam and Sierra, I truly love this podcast and listen often. You two hold so much grace and compassion for all of us JBU listeners, and I am very grateful for both of you. I have learned a lot of self-love and self-compassion from listening to you. Thank you for the prompted head and heart work. My life feels like a curse. I have tried so hard to figure out why my life seems to be destined for anguish, what I did to deserve this, but I have no answers. I grew up in an emotionally and mentally abusive home. My mom has unregulated narcissistic personality disorder as well as depression and refuses any self-awareness or accountability. I don't want this to reinforce the negative stigma of this disorder because there are many people with it who have learned to manage it and be healthy individuals, but that was not the case for my mom. She constantly criticized my acne, my weight, my grades, my extracurriculars, my friends, everything. She controlled my entire life. She would gaslight me, say horrible things to me, and then pretend like everything was fine. She would get jealous of my friends' parents when I would hang out at their house. Mm-hmm. In one of her worst depressive episodes, she told me she wanted to kill herself so that she wouldn't have to be my mom anymore. I complied with her every demand. I tried so hard in school and sports to try and appease her, and nothing was ever good enough for her. After I graduated high school, I started dating this amazing guy named Sam. He was my outlet. I would call him crying and tell him all of the awful things that she would say or do. She would send him messages to try and scare him off. He saw the abuse and helped me to see it too. I started packing my things when I turned 18 and hiding all of my packed bags in the corner behind my dresser with the intention of moving in with one of my best friends and her family to escape my mom. I wrote my parents a letter, left it on the counter, and moved out. I only had the courage to do that because of Sam. I moved in with my best friend as planned. Long story short, my best friend deeply betrayed my trust, and I had to move out of that situation. I had nowhere else to go, so unless I wanted to live out of my car, my other option was to marry Sam right away. His dad was the bishop of our church, so we were not allowed to live together unless we were married, despite only dating for 6 months. Our marriage was tumultuous and chaotic, to say the least. I was dealing with my leaving my entire life behind, my family, my pets, most of my belongings, my best friend. I had lost everything to try and protect my own well-being. I felt so lost and alone. I didn't know who the hell I was without my mom controlling every aspect of my life. As soon as we got married, Sam got hugely into video games, which he never played when we were dating. He became addicted to them. He would wake up early to play them before work and then hop on immediately after work and play until around 2 a.m. He played all day, every day during the weekends. I really needed him, and he wasn't there for me. I was also incredibly mentally unhealthy. I was struggling with depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, thoughts, etc. We had a lot of ups and downs, as all marriages do, but being 18 and 22 made it extra challenging. I had no support system except for Sam, no friends, no family, no one. Sam needed to talk out issues immediately, even if that meant staying up till 4 a.m. or making me miss my college classes and tests. When I would bring up my problem with his video game playing, he would throw his controllers and shatter them, or he would break all of his old games to scare me and make me feel guilty. I was extremely jealous and insecure. I would often go through his phone. We started to get better and work on making our relationship healthier, or so I thought. Sam had struggled with substance abuse before we started dating. He had started using again, and I didn't know. 2.5 years into our marriage, when I was 20 and he was 24, he passed away from a drug overdose. He asked me to pick him up from a friend's house on a Friday night at 2 a.m. I always told him to call me if he was ever too drunk to drive, and I would happily come get him. When I picked him up, he told me that he only had a few shots, but he was obviously more intoxicated than a few shots would make him. We got home, and I asked him if he had taken anything with his friends, and he told me no. I told him that I knew he was lying, but I couldn't force him to tell me. I told him I loved him and went to bed. He wanted to stay up and play video games, so he was on the living room couch. When I woke up, he wasn't next to me. I walked into the living room and found him unresponsive on the couch. I tried to wake him up and couldn't. I was pissed that he had lied to me and that he decided to fuck around with some drug when he knows he's prone to addiction and had already done this to me once before. A few months prior, I woke up to find him unresponsive on the couch. I was able to wake him after a few hours, and he told me that he had taken some Xanax. We had a conversation about how awful an experience that was for me and that he wouldn't do it again. I ran a couple errands, and when I came back, it was around 1 p.m. and he was still unresponsive. I was starting to get worried and decided to call 911. He was in the hospital for 3 weeks, suffered a traumatic brain injury, a heart attack, major kidney issues, etc. I had to make the decision at 20 years old to take my husband's feeding tubes out. I had to sign the do not resuscitate forms before I could even legally drink. I felt and still feel so much guilt. If I had just taken him to the hospital sooner to that day, maybe it wouldn't have been so bad. If only I hadn't been so mad at him, I could have actually been a good wife and taken care of him. What if? It is so fucking hard. Almost now, Even now, almost 3 years after his death, I cry for him and talk about him constantly. It is just such a hard truth to live with. It is so hard to live with this guilt that I carry. Part of me knows it isn't my fault. He made his choices and he lied to me about it. I didn't know what was in his system, and if I had, I would have reacted differently. But I did the best I could with the knowledge that I had. But on the other hand, I truly feel like it is all my fault. He did tell me once that I make him miserable every day of his life. Maybe that really was his truth, and that's why he turned back to drugs. Again, I was alone, no family, no friends, and I had no support system to hold me while I grieved. I guess my question is, how do we live with these hard truths? How are we supposed to go on with life carrying these heavy, heavy things? I have a tendency to believe that I am to blame for all of the hurt the people around me face. I feel responsible for my mom's suffering. I feel responsible for Sam's suffering and his death. It seems I am the common denominator in so much hurt. I have worked so hard to get to a better place through therapy, but I still struggle with this idea. I am so grateful for any musings and words of wisdom. I am also grateful if all you do is read this. I know it's a long one. Thank you, Nessie.
Oh, Nessie, thank you so much for writing and for trusting us with this letter. That is a deeply painful story, and it's not a story, it's your lived experience. And I want to hold you and tell you that I love you and that you're carrying so much. I see how heavy it is, how exhausting it must feel to constantly have to answer to the questions in your head and to the training that you were taught as a child, that you are responsible for other people's wellness. I know how tiring that is, and I can only imagine after all of this trauma of you just trying to save yourself, just trying to exist, to be good, to be loved, to have this be the outcome. I can only imagine how incredibly exhausting it is to work through this on a daily basis. So I just want to say I love you, and I see that labor, and I see how tired you must be. And I also just want to say you are incredibly brave to even be examining these things. I don't think that we give ourselves enough credit. When we're struggling, the first thing we say is, I'm struggling, I'm failing, and not, I am being so resilient right now. I'm still enduring this. I'm working so hard with all of these things on my shoulders right now. We don't often see how hard we're working in times of struggle because we just see how we just see what we perceive as failure instead of labor, instead of exhaustion. You're very brave, and I wish you didn't have to be so fucking brave. I wish this wasn't the way it was. I
also want to say that I believe you, right? I believe this experience happened to you. I believe that your mom was emotionally abusive. I believe that your experience with Sam's video game addiction was really challenging. I believe you that finding his unresponsive body and going through the process of having to take him off life support was deeply awful. And I believe you that you feel like you are responsible for everyone else. And I believe you that you know that that's not true. I believe all of those things. And I know that from my own experience with dealing with trauma, that often how I feel is that people just don't get it, or that they don't believe me, or that it's somehow sort of separating me from other people. And I want to say, I'll never get it because our experiences are so different. And I don't know what it's like to do the things that you had to do. But I do want to say that I believe 100% your experience of it, right? And I trust that you know what happened, and that all of the things that you're describing are happening to you in this moment as well. So I hope that you hear that, and that you recognize that even though this experience may be something that the two of us can never share together because it didn't happen to me, it only happened to you, that I am seeing you in that experience and that I am trying to get close to you, right? Trying to sort of hold you in that experience, because I want you to know that it's not making us separate. It's not separating you from me. It is something that Sierra and I can hold with you, right? It's something that we can say, yeah, absolutely. All of those things are 100% true. And your experiences in this are absolutely real. And we see them with you.
That is beautiful. Nessie, I want to also say a couple other direct things that you may know or have been told before, but I would be remiss if I didn't say it out loud. I have compassion for your mom as I have compassion for all human beings. And I also want to directly say she failed you. Your mother failed you. And I want you to draw the line between the way your mother taught you to be responsible for her wellness to now, to today, to the belief that you keep mulling over, the questions you keep mulling over of whether or not you could have done something better to prevent this. The way that you're speaking to yourself is a language that was given to you. You didn't choose this. You didn't choose any of this other than trying to survive, right? We, in our worst of times, are only doing the best that we can with the knowledge and experience and the choices that we have at that moment, right? And like you said, you went from choice to choice to the best that you could. And I also want to say, one of your questions is like, how do we deal with these hard truths? And I love that question because I love the humanity in it and the simplicity of like, how do we deal with this? Because sometimes it feels impossible. What words could I possibly say to tell you how to deal with this, you know?
Yeah.
But I want to pull out one word as like a linguist, as a writer, and say hard truths. I want to make sure you're categorizing these things correctly. The hard truth is not, there are things that you could have done differently. The hard truth is, you know, your boyfriend said that thing to you because he was in pain. Your boyfriend or your husband said that hurtful thing to him because he didn't have the tools to express his pain in a more compassionate, curious, and constructive way. That's a hard truth. The hard truth is he will never be able to fulfill that, right? That's the hard truth. The hard truth is not there's something you could have done differently to save him, right? The hard truth is not if you were a different daughter, your mother would love you differently. The hard truth is your mother is a difficult person to love. Your mother cruelly expected you to be the orchestrator of all her happiness. Your mother, the hard truth is your mother set impossible standards in your heart for you to be enough. But I want to tell you, you are enough, despite the narrative in your head right now from 100 different directions telling that you are not. You're not broken for being hurt by somebody who was trying to hurt you. You're not broken for being unable to fix someone's addiction. You're not broken for being dragged by an incredibly hard life experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All of that. I think contextualizing some of those hard truths is important because your brain is trying to tell you things about how to protect yourself that may feel really true that aren't. Right. So that idea that like you're responsible for everyone's happiness may feel really true. And I see that and I believe that is true for you. And I want to say that like that is your head and your heart and your body trying to protect you from the bad things that have happened. Right. Because your mom created for you a through line to say, if you don't make me and everyone else happy, I'm going to do bad things. Right. And so like, of course you believe that is true, because from your earliest years, you've been taught that that's your job. And there are examples which you list here where that has played out. And that's only one element of the story, right?
Yes.
That's the story you've been told over and over again, saying this is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But it's not. There's so much more that is involved in that story that has little to do with the things that you were doing or the fact that you were required to make people happy. And there's a lot in this letter that I deeply resonate with. My dad committed suicide 2 years ago. He was really awful to me and my family. It was a very sort of traumatic time. And then he killed himself. And then I was the one that found his body. And I will say that for 2 years, I didn't even know how to process the trauma of that. And now I'm embarking on this new therapy. It's called cognitive perception therapy or cognitive processing therapy, designed for folks who have experienced PTSD. And when I started doing it, I was like, I'm 2 years out from this event. Why the hell would I be doing PTSD therapy at this point, right? Like I should be over that. And it has been immensely helpful for me to unpack some of the lies that trauma is telling me about my experience of it, the fact that I was the one that caused it, the fact that I was the one who should have done something different to prevent it, and helped me is helping me, right? It hasn't helped me yet. I'm still working on it, but is helping me reframe some of those things for me and to be able to zoom out on some of those lies that I'm believing to instead say like, there were things that I could have done differently, and the outcome could have been 100% the same because I am just one factor in what happened here, right? And or this idea of like you talk about in the letter of like, if I had just taken him to the hospital earlier, things could have gone differently. And asking yourself those questions of what's the evidence that supports that? Says who? What are other things that could have happened, right? Like, again, sort of taking out this narrative that our trauma has created for us about what we should have done or how we could have prevented this so that it'll never happen again. And recognizing that, like, the answer to those questions is so much more complicated than just, I should have done something different or I did the thing to cause this, which in itself is such a comforting belief in a strange, weird way, because it means that we have control. It means that we can prevent it from happening again. If I can love my next partner differently, he won't die in this way. And that's comforting for sure. But what's more comforting is to sort of take that step back, or at least for me, has been to take that step back and realize that like it's all outside, so much of it, almost all of it is outside of my control. And I didn't do anything to cause this. I literally did nothing to cause this. And it's so weird for me to say that out loud, because if you had talked to me 6 months ago, I would have given you a list of things that I should have or could have done differently to prevent this from happening to me. But I am getting closer to believing some of that stuff because of this therapy that I've been working on. So I know you have a therapist. I know that you've been working with a therapist, but would encourage you to ask about or think about cognitive processing therapy, because it's been immensely helpful for me in finding different answers to some of the questions that you're asking in this letter.
I love that, Sam. Thank you so much for sharing that. The last thing I want to touch on is compassion for yourself, tenderness for yourself. In other shows, I have talked about this, but I think it's probably been the most powerful tool for me in forgiving myself or letting go of shame. I want you, Nessie, to think about all the letters you hear on our show and all the other lived experiences that you hear our letter writers write in about. And I want you to sit in and feel the compassion that you give to those people. When somebody else writes in and says, I had this terrible lived experience and I feel like it's my fault, do you automatically think it's that person's fault? What sort of understanding and gentleness do you extend to strangers that you are withholding from yourself? I know I've said this before on the show, but I always think about, what if a child did this? what if a stranger did this? How would I feel about this situation if I no longer saw it through the lens of the insane expectations I hold on myself and myself alone? You were a child when you learned how to accept love from your mother. And you were a child when you got married. And I don't mean that in any disparaging way to teenagers or to younger people. And I'm sorry if it comes off that way, but think about all of the lessons we learned through living and being in relationships. You were doing the best that you could at the time. And I want you to, the next time you have one of those intrusive thoughts, like, you know, I could have done something differently, or XYZ is my fault. I want you to think of the young girl that you were and picture it like a stranger. Picture me, right? Picture Sam and I. Would you ever tell either of us that something that like what you went through was our fault? We are not very well versed in giving ourselves compassion, but we are capable of giving it to strangers and other people in our lives so much easier. So picture yourself as a child, picture yourself as someone that deserves the gentleness and tenderness and care that you give to others. You write that you've tried so hard to figure out why your life feels destined for anguish, or what you did to deserve this and that. And that's so painful to read. It's so relatable. I understand that quest, that seeking for an answer or seeking for what you could do differently to prevent this. Or like Sam said, this comfort of like, well, I deserve this. This is my destiny. This makes sense, right? But I promise you, there is not some tally, right? There's not some correlation between the horrible things that happen to us and our deservedness. If it would, then the world would make a ton more sense, right? And Mark fucking Zuckerberg would not be so fucking rich. Do you know what I mean? Like, again, like Sam said, look for the proof. Is there proof out there that good things happen to good people? Because all I see is the contrary, that terrible things happen to good people all the time. And not only that, terrible, impossible, unfathomable things happen to people who don't have the tools to respond to them in any other way than the way that they did. We are often put in situations in which we are asked to deal with something that we have unqualified tools for, right? And we do our best and we make it through, and then we somehow think that unqualification is our fault. I'm getting a little spirally here, but I want you to picture yourself as a baby, as somebody who deserves love and tenderness and care and compassion and understanding, as somebody who deserves gentleness, deserved something different than this. And to believe me when I say this is not your fault.
So Nessie, at the very least, I hope that you feel the love that Sierra and I have for you, and that we appreciate and understand how you're feeling, and that we want you to know that the stories that you're telling yourself about the fact that you deserved this, or the fact that you caused this, or the fact that you should have prevented it, are stories that the two of us know not to be true. And that we recognize how hard it can be to see that when you're in it, when it's the only thing that has been reinforced for you over and over again. And our invitation is to find ways, whatever it looks like for you and whatever way is helpful, to begin to see if there are other alternatives out there for you, other ways of believing about yourself and about the really awful and horrible things that you've been through in your life.
We love you so much.
Thank you so much for writing. All right, everyone, this brings us to the blind date segment of our episode. This is when we try and set you up with something that we think you're really going to like. And this week, we want to send you home with...
Okay, so I'm sure this has been out, since 2020. My bad. But this is a documentary series on Netflix called Babies, and it's about babies. And I'm not recommending this nor watching it because I have a baby right now, although that is like very aligned. My wife and I are watching this Netflix series, and it's basically about the science that reveals how infants discover life in their first year and how they process faces and information and newness. And it is like groundbreaking scientific research that they haven't been able to do like ever, because babies are hard to study, like their brains. And the discoveries are like just straight up fascinating. So it's cool for us to watch because we have this almost 3 month baby. But also I can't help but think when I watch it about us, about you and I and our listeners, and the insane pressure we put on ourselves to be perfect and to be capable at all times. When in reality, like, we are all figuring that out, as we always say. We are all beautifully flawed and imperfect. And when I watched this documentary about like the awe and the wonder that we experience, not just as babies, but watching babies discover things and learn, and remembering that we were all that once, that we were all new, and like, we don't expect babies to have it all fucking figured out, is what I'm trying to say. Like, we extend so much compassion and understanding and gentleness to babies, which is sort of what I was referencing in the last letter. And we deserve that all the time. We are babies all the time. Is essentially what I'm going to
I love it.
Just go to my grave saying. Basically, you are the same person you were when you were born. And we deserve the same awe and gentleness that we give babies. Okay, spiraling a little bit because I need to eat lunch and my hunger is taking over. But anyway, the show is fascinating. The science is fascinating. The fact that we are humans that exist, that grow up and learn how to hate ourselves, is fucking fascinating. I love watching the show and just thinking about the path of all of us here on Just Break Up. Anyway, it's called Babies. It's on Netflix. You can watch it now. There are 2 seasons out.
I love it. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. You can like us on Facebook, and you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Just Break Up Pod.
You can slide into our DMs, send us your favorite relationship memes, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise.
Please remember to follow, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts, and consider supporting us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month, you will get an additional bonus weekly episode. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod. This literally keeps the mics on and helps us reach more brokenhearted souls who need 2 random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Original music, editing, producing, all magical things by our good friend Spencer Worth Davis, aka Big Cats. Make sure to check out his newest podcast, Finding Quantum Quest, and his music under Big Cats on Spotify. And remember, despite what we've been taught, what we were told by folks who didn't know how to love us well, we do not deserve the bad things that happen to us. Even if we hurt people, even if we make mistakes, even if we are inherently flawed, as all humans are, we don't deserve the hard and terrible things that happen to us in life. And there is rarely anything we can do to actually prevent them. And if all else fails,
just break up.